step into a world where being neurodivergent is celebrated and the conversations are as real as they are eye-opening. Welcome to Femme on the Spectrum, where autism, ADHD, and life's biggest issues collide in the most empowering way. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and I am thrilled to have you back with us. Today, we're diving into a topic that, while heavy, is incredibly important: why autistic women are more prone to abuse. But don't worry, we're keeping it witty and educational because laughter heals, right? So grab your favorite mug, get cozy, and let's get into the nitty-gritty of how family dynamics, social expectations, and our unique neurodivergent makeup create an environment ripe for different forms of abuse. Lighthearted sound effect, record scratch, or drum beat. Hey folks, let's start with a hard truth. If you're an autistic woman, chances are you've been in at least one, okay, let's be real, probably more, abusive situations. And we're not just talking romantic relationships here. We're diving into all kinds of abuse: emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, social exclusion, and yes, physical harm too. You name it, we've probably faced it. So, why are autistic women more vulnerable to these forms of abuse? Well, for starters, our challenges with social cues and trust can make us easy targets. Think about it. Autistic women are often deeply honest and trusting. We take people at face value because that's just how we operate. Our transparency is our strength, but it can also be a double-edged sword. While we're showing our whole hand, most people are out there bluffing. Let me hit you with a staggering statistic. Did you know autistic women are 4 times more likely to experience sexual violence compared to neurotypical women? Yep, you heard me right, 4 times. That's from a Harvard Health blog article in 2022. It's like getting dealt a bad hand of cards and then finding out the deck was rigged from the start. When we say abuse, it's not just the obvious cases. Emotional manipulation can sneak in like a thief in the night, leaving you questioning your own reality. Financial exploitation. It's the subtle ways someone might borrow money but never pay it back, all while you're left twisting yourself into knots to make ends meet. And social exclusion? That's when people decide you're too weird or difficult and just ghost you out of social circles. For autistic women, these forms of abuse are even more insidious. Our natural transparency and honesty can become vulnerabilities, making us easier to exploit, manipulate, and exclude. It's like being thrown into a poker game where everyone's bluffing but us, and we're the ones paying the price. So, yeah, if you've ever felt like the world is out to get you, you're not imagining it. All right, let's take a breather and sip some coffee while that sinks in. Up next, we're diving into family dynamics and how being the family scapegoat only adds more fuel to the fire. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. All right, we're back. Let's dive into family dynamics and this thing called scapegoating. Picture this: you're the sensitive, curious kid in a dysfunctional family. You're pointing out the truth no one else wants to face, and bam, you're cast as the villain in a movie you didn't even audition for. Sound familiar? Yep, welcome to the life of the family scapegoat. So, what does it mean to be the scapegoat? Essentially, you're the designated blame magnet. If something goes wrong, big or small, it lands on your shoulders. Maybe the family pet ran away or your sibling got a bad grade. Somehow, it all becomes your fault. And this isn't just an occasional thing, it's a recurring theme. The blame game is on, and you're always it. And let me tell you, as an autistic person, being scapegoated in a family can be especially gut wrenching. I've been there. Imagine just trying to be heard at the dinner table, pointing out discrepancies or inconvenient truths and getting shut down. Over time, you start doubting yourself. Is there really something wrong with me? Spoiler alert, there isn't, but it can sure feel like it. Why is it that autistic children are often the ones scapegoated? Well, it boils down to projection. Parents or family members often project their unresolved issues onto the child who doesn't fit the neurotypical mold. Autistic kids value honesty and fairness, which can be threatening in a family striving to maintain a picture perfect image. When we spot the proverbial elephant in the room and say, "Hey, why is there an elephant in the room?" instead of addressing the issue, the family blames us for noticing it. It's the classic shoot the messenger scenario. Want some numbers to back this up? Around 75% of adults from dysfunctional families report being assigned roles like the scapegoat or even the golden child. That's according to the Family Dynamics Institute, which did a deep dive into these toxic roles back in 20s and 20. For autistic kids, this role is especially damaging. Our truth telling nature and inability to conform make us the perfect fall guys for family drama. The blame isn't just unfair, it's also deeply confusing and painful. We're left questioning our self worth, which, let's face it, is already under constant assault from the outside world. All right, folks, that's a heavy serving of family dynamics for you. Next up, we're going to chat about how autism and PTSD create the perfect storm. Grab another coffee and let's keep this important conversation going. All right, folks, grab that coffee because we're diving into some science now. It's time to talk about the connection between autism and PTSD. And believe me, it's a doozy. You might wonder why autistic people are more susceptible to PTSD. Let's break it down. First things first, autistic brains are super sensitive. We're talking high alert 24/7. This heightened sensitivity makes us more likely to develop PTSD, even from what might be considered small traumatic events to neurotypical folks. Our sensory systems are constantly picking up on details, sounds, and feelings that others might not even notice, and this can make certain experiences feel overwhelmingly traumatic. Think about it like this. While Karen from accounting might shrug off a rude comment as just another day at the office, we might replay that moment in our heads for 6 months, analyzing every word and inflection. And here's where it gets even more intense. Those replays aren't just annoying, they're re traumatizing. It's like we can't escape the traumatic event because our brains keep reliving it in vivid detail. Now, let's talk stats to really drive this home. Approximately 32% of autistic adults meet the criteria for PTSD, compared to just 4% of the general population. Yep, you heard me right, 32%. That's from a study by Rumball et al. In 2021. So, if you're feeling like you're carrying around a bit more emotional baggage than others, there's a reason for it. But why exactly does this happen? For starters, our brains process sensory input differently. A loud argument that a neurotypical person might brush off can feel earth shattering to us. Our brains are wired to take in more detail, which can make traumatic events feel much more intense and inescapable. Add to that the emotional weight of constant rejection, misunderstandings, and the exhausting effort of masking, and you've got the perfect storm for trauma. So, while Karen from accounting gets to move on with her day, we're left grappling with the emotional equivalent of an earthquake. It's no wonder our PTSD stats are through the roof. All right, let's simmer down for a second and digest all that before we move on to masking, the double edged sword that keeps us looking normal but leaves us emotionally drained. Stick around. This next segment is going to be just as enlightening. Elizabeth here, ready to talk about something that every autistic person knows all too well: masking. Masking, the survival skill that makes us look normal, but leaves us feeling like we just ran an emotional marathon every single day. Imagine it like wearing a scratchy Halloween costume all year round. Uncomfortable. Oh, you bet. But sometimes it's our only way of navigating a world that wasn't built with us in mind. So, why is masking such a big deal? Well, it's like constantly performing in a play without any breaks. We're acting out neurotypical behaviors to fit in, and it drains us physically, emotionally, mentally. This effort to blend in isn't just a minor inconvenience, it can lead to serious burnout and emotional exhaustion. By prioritizing social acceptance over being our true selves, we end up suppressing our instincts and ignoring those all important gut feelings. I remember countless times when I've masked my true self just to avoid conflict. Did I realize my so called best friend was using me for free rides to work and emotional labor? Not until year three. And by then, I was too emotionally drained to confront it. It's like you're sinking in quicksand, trying to maintain that normal facade while everything else is pulling you down. Now, let's throw some numbers at you. According to Hull et al., around 80% of autistic women report engaging in masking behaviors. And you guessed it, these behaviors often lead to significant burnout and emotional exhaustion. So, if you've ever felt like you're running on empty, masking is likely a big part of that. The thing about masking is we do it to avoid immediate conflict, but it comes at the cost of long term well being. We may avoid a few awkward moments or harsh judgments in the short term, but the emotional toll it takes can be devastating. So, why do we keep doing it? Simple survival. Masking is our way of making it through a world that often doesn't understand us. And while it's a necessary survival tactic, it's also a double edged sword that demands a high price from us. All right, take a deep breath with me. Up next, we're going to discuss society's role in labeling us as weird or difficult and how those labels shape our experiences. So stay tuned, you won't want to miss it. All right, back and ready for more, folks. It's time to dive into the ever charming world of societal labels and stereotypes about autistic women. Ever been called weird, difficult, or even emotionally immature? Yeah, me too. And let me tell you, those labels pack a punch. So, why do we get these labels slapped on us like unwanted name tags at a high school reunion? It stems from misunderstanding and a lack of awareness. Society often operates on a set of norms and expectations that just don't jive with how our neurodivergent brains work. We express ourselves differently, and instead of understanding, people often resort to labeling. But here's the kicker, these labels can be more than just annoying. They lead to a cycle of isolation and low self esteem. When we get excluded or ostracized for being different, we start internalizing those judgments. Maybe we do talk too much, or maybe we're too sensitive. It must be our fault, right? Wrong. It's society's failure to accommodate different ways of being. And the stats back this up. Over 50% of autistic adults report experiencing social exclusion or bullying in adulthood. That's from a study by Massey et al. In 2020. So when we feel like the odd one's out, it's not just in our heads, it's a documented reality. Now let's get personal for a sec. I remember this one time at a work function. Everyone's mingling, laughing, having a great time. Me? I'm standing there like a deer in headlights. Someone makes a joke that goes way over my head. And when I don't laugh, I get that look. You know the one, the what's wrong with you glance. Moments like these make us question our worth and whether we really belong. Here's the thing, our differences should be celebrated, not stigmatized. Our honesty, our unique perspectives, our so called quirks, these are strengths, not weaknesses. But when society labels us as weird, it weaponizes these strengths against us, leading to further isolation and vulnerability. It's like being punished for playing by the rules in a game where everyone else cheats. No wonder we often end up with battered self esteem and a heightened vulnerability to abuse and manipulation. All right, give yourself a pat on the back for sticking with me through that. Up next, we're talking about how to turn this pain into power. Yes, it's possible. And we're going to get into it right after this. Stay tuned. All right, everyone, let's flip the script and talk solutions. How can we mitigate abuse and trauma as autistic women? I'm Elizabeth, and it's time to turn pain into power. First up, we need to talk about education and awareness. Schools and workplaces need to step up their game. Think about it. If people actually understood what being autistic means, we might face a little less ignorance and a lot more empathy. Awareness programs are key here. According to the National Autism Society, schools that implemented such programs saw bullying rates drop by 30%. That's huge. Imagine what that could do in workplaces, too. Next, building a support network is essential. And I don't just mean any support network, I mean people who really get it. So, kailangan ka na heri kim hor. Whether it's friends, family, or even online communities, surrounding yourself with people who understand your journey can make a world of difference. And while we're at it, let's talk therapists, specifically trauma informed therapists. Finding someone who understands the intricacies of autism and trauma can be a game changer. Early interventions can reduce trauma related disorders in autistic individuals by up to 40%, according to a study by Smith et al. In 2019. That's not just a number, it's quality of life. Now, let me throw in some personal recommendations. First, don't be afraid to set boundaries. It's not just okay, it's necessary. Your peace is priceless. Second, educate yourself. Knowledge is power. The more you know about autism and trauma, the better equipped you'll be to advocate for yourself. And lastly, never underestimate the power of self care. Whether it's sensory friendly clothing, quiet time, or just a good cup of coffee, find what soothes your soul and make it a priority. Turning pain into power isn't just a catchphrase, it's a way of life. By educating others, building strong support networks, and prioritizing our mental health, we can create a safer, more understanding world for ourselves. That's all for this segment. Stick around because up next, we've got some humor to lighten the mood. And believe me, you're going to want to hear these stories. Stay tuned. Elizabeth here, and it's time to sprinkle a little laughter into this heavy mix. Seriously, if we can't laugh at the absurdities of life, we're doing it wrong. And let's face it, sometimes our experiences, while challenging, can be pretty darn hilarious in hindsight. Ever sent someone a 2,000 word text pouring your heart out and got back a single K? Yeah, same. I mean, come on, how do you even respond to that? Do you send another essay explaining how K made you feel, or do you just throw your phone out the window and move on? Or what about that friend who borrowed $50 back in college, saying they needed it for emergencies, and then posted an Instagram story from Coachella? Classic. You're sitting there eating instant noodles, thinking, well, guess I'm an inadvertent sponsor of her festival experience. The irony is just too rich. Sound effect laughter track. Let's not forget the everyday awkward moments that we all go through. Like when you're at a social gathering and someone asks you a question, but you mishear it and give a totally unrelated answer. The room goes silent and everyone's just staring at you. What's a girl to do? Laugh it off, of course. Pretend you did it on purpose, and suddenly you're the comedic genius of the party. Humor is our best ally. It's the glue that holds our sanity together when the world feels like it's falling apart. Turning these awkward, frustrating situations into funny anecdotes gives us power over them. And sometimes sharing these stories can lighten someone else's load too. So, yes, we've got our challenges, but we've got our laughs too. And that, my friends, is how we roll on Femme on the spectrum. Stick around because next, we're wrapping things up with some final thoughts on navigating life as an autistic woman. But always remember, no matter how tough things get, there's always room for a little laughter. All right, everyone, we've covered a lot today. So let's take a moment to recap the key points from this episode. We've talked about the various types of abuse autistic women are more prone to: emotional, financial, social, and physical. We've unpacked why we're more vulnerable to these kinds of abuse, highlighting our challenges with social cues and our natural transparency and honesty, which can sometimes be a double-edged sword. We also dove into the family dynamics that cast us as scapegoats, making us the blame magnets in dysfunctional family settings. And let's not forget the science behind autism and PTSD, showing how our neurodivergent wiring makes traumatic events hit harder and linger longer. We explored the exhausting practice of masking, the toll it takes on us, and how society's labels add another layer of burden and isolation. But we didn't stop there. We turned pain into power by discussing the importance of education and awareness, building supportive networks, and finding trauma-informed therapists. Now, let's put a positive spin on things. Advocacy efforts are making a difference. Schools with awareness programs are seeing significant drops in bullying, and early intervention can reduce trauma-related disorders by up to 40%. That's real progress, folks. So what's the takeaway? It's crucial for us to understand these dynamics so we can break the cycle of abuse, scapegoating, and trauma. Knowledge is power, and together we can create a safer, more understanding world. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Femme on the Spectrum. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and it's been a privilege to share this time with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends, or even your frenemies who might need a wake-up call. And as always, check the show notes for any links or articles mentioned in today's episode. Catch you next time, and remember, no matter how tough things get, there's always a way to turn pain into power. Closing theme music.